Strauss Brandon, who is the Northeast Regional Vice President of NeighborWorks and also a very good colleague and good sounding board and supporter of community development here in Philadelphia. So Joan, thank you again for this opportunity, and we're really excited to hear about your work and what your colleagues are uncovering.
Thank you so much, Pam, and thanks to PACDC to give us this opportunity. It's always a pleasure to partner with you on all kinds of things. So good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know, just briefly, NeighborWorks America is a national organization. We get our funding primarily from Congress. We we have a network of organizations all over the country, approximately 250 nonprofits, CDCs that do primarily housing community development work. Here in the Northeast, we are all over in New England, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands. And just a little bit of background before I introduce the study. We had been hearing in the Northeast, just as Pam had just, talked about, how challenging it was for a lot of our organizations to find and retain quality staff, and staff that reflect the communities that they serve in particular, but just staff overall in various positions within their CDCs and nonprofit affordable housing organizations. So we decided, and actually, and hearing it in the Northeast, and I checked in with my counterparts across the country, and they too said that they've been challenged by it. It wasn't just a Northeast phenomenon. So what we decided to do was commission a study to look at what types of programs and strategies are out there nationally that have been successful in recruiting and retaining staff. And we were interested in the programs themselves, but we were even more interested in what aspects of those programs made them successful, so that we could replicate them at NeighborWorks and to assist our network organizations and the community development field overall in what are some of the strategies that work. So in a little while, I'm going to introduce Ann Silverman and Paula Anzar, who were the consultants that we were working with, who did the study and did a report. And following Ann and Paula's presentation, we're going to hear from Stephen Briggs, the Vice President of Community Solutions, covering Pennsylvania and Delaware from Wells Fargo, and from Harry Tapia, who many of you may know, and locally in Philadelphia, who is the CFO of HACE. And HACE is the newest NeighborWorks affiliate in the Northeast region, and we're delighted that HACE has just decided to join us and join the NeighborWorks network. So with that, I'm going to be I want to introduce Ann and Paula. Ann Silverman has been a consultant for roughly 20 years. She has supported leadership transitions, led executive searches, and assisted organizations with searches for staff members, particularly in affordable housing development and finance. Ann has completed organizational assessments, strategic plans, and program evaluations. She has coached people seeking to enter community development or consider career changes within community development. Prior to becoming a consultant, Ann was a capacity building funder at Boston LISC, a founding nonprofit executive director at the Association for Resident Control of Housing, and a real estate project manager at Boston Housing Authority and at Alston Brighton CDC. Based in Boston, Ann has worked with community-based nonprofits and funders regionally and nationally. Paula Anzar has spent the last 30 years developing a broad skill set and network in nonprofit community development, higher education, and startup accelerators. As a founding executive director of a community-based nonprofit, she developed the leadership capabilities of low-income, multiracial, multilingual staff and board made up of parents and providers advocating for accessible, affordable, high-quality childcare in Boston's low-income neighborhoods. She went on to hold leadership roles in other organizations developing affordable housing and empowering residents. Paula and Ann worked together at the Association for Resident Control of Housing in the early 1990s. I'm aging you, sorry guys. Paula joined the L. Silverman consulting team in May 2019. Paula and Ann have collaborated on a diverse set of searches and related research. And then you, like I said, you will hear from Stephen, who's will share, Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo has been a tremendous supporter of NeighborWorks America in terms of training and in this space of recruiting and retaining staff. And of course, from Harry, who will talk about the wonderful strategies that HACE has used throughout its history as a nonprofit here in Philadelphia, that has been so successful in recruiting and retaining staff. And we want this to be a dialogue. We're still learning, so we'd love to hear from the rest of you, some of the strategies that you've learned, what's working for you, but please feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hands or however way you feel comfortable to be called on. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann.
Thank you. Thanks, Joni. And thanks to all of you for what you're doing all the time and engaging in this conversation. And it is a very personal conversation, I think, for all of us. For me, having been in community development, having consulted to a number of groups, there is nothing I care more about other than my family than the issues of human resources and leadership in community development. So I hope what we can do today is give you a summary. It won't be the full detailed report, and Joni and company will be making that available at a later date, but really tell you about what we saw and the thoughts that what we saw have provoked for us. So moving along, what you'll see is we've got a number of questions that we asked for two people who we talked to about recruitment, retention, and leadership development. So we asked, what are the current challenges? Who's addressing these challenges? What can we learn from addressing these challenges? And what actions should we recommend? We looked at a wide number of groups. We identified more than 50 programs, both in community development and not in community development. We conducted follow-up interviews with 11 programs and 5 additional stakeholders, and we evaluated success factors. We heard many common themes. I suspect these will be familiar to many of you. People tell us it's very hard to find qualified project managers. It's really hard to find a diverse pool of talent. Our work is under the radar screen, especially for young people. A little bit of a mystery why they don't know about community development as a career option. And the competition from the private sector for skilled staff and leaders is quite intense. So what do we do with all of that? We look at community development as a whole, and we say, well, how do people get in? What happens? How do they rise in the field? People learn about community development, in many cases, not in high school, but maybe that would be a good idea, but perhaps early on with programs like AmeriCorps, and they might come in, but they might transition out. Why are they transitioning out? Maybe they're not getting enough support to grow in the work. Some people want to come in the middle of their career after they've been doing something else, and yet they're not necessarily encouraged based on the skills that they're being asked for or various other reasons. People leave community development mid-career. Why is that? Is it because organizations are not inclusive and are not promoting people of color from within?
First of all, when I opened it up,
we find some people seeking to enter community development at a senior level, and yet compensation and other factors may be barriers. And then we see people leaving. Sometimes that provides opportunities as seasoned leaders move out, But it also provides, it's also a bit of a gap, and boards get very nervous when longtime leaders leave community development. Moving on, we separated these challenges into entry, mid, and senior level. So just in more detail, challenges to entry include young people not knowing about community development as a career. Entry level people, particularly from targeted communities, may not have the technical skills that the organizations are seeking. People of color from targeted communities are not always well represented in the CBOs, and that may be due to historic organizational culture and hiring practices. And mid to senior level staffing requirements may make it difficult for people who want to come in as mid-career folks at the levels that they're already at. So those are challenges to entry. Challenges that lead to exit. People are looking for competitive salaries and benefits. Community-based organizations have extremely high expectations, and at least in some of our organizations, people experience isolation as being maybe the only one or two people of color. In the increasingly complex world of community development, we are asking people to know a lot of things about finance and construction and organizational management, and there's a lot of complexity that some folks say, I just want to do one piece. I don't want to understand all of this. And long-term leaders are retiring, which is a challenge and an opportunity. The opportunities in recent times, diversity and inclusion are growing priorities, both locally and nationally. We did find programs that are addressing the challenges. However, we found that they are piecemeal, not necessarily comprehensive. So now is a great time to really be looking at the programs, identifying where there are gaps in information and resources, and seeing what we can do to really have a system that makes it possible for people to move through community development. Maybe not in one organization, but certainly keep people in the work and have them grow in the work. Some specific programs that we looked at, we put on this same continuum. In terms of entry into community development, out in California, you have the California Coalition for Rural Housing's internship program for people in college. We have the Keene Fellowship program here in Boston for graduate students who get 2 years working at community development corporations or nonprofits. The ACRE program in Milwaukee, which is designed to get people of color into real estate positions at all levels, including community development through training and mentoring. We have programs that are addressing at organizational level how to keep people. For example, New Jersey Community Capital's Culture of Excellence and Common Bond Communities out in the Midwest. We didn't find much by way of programs to help people enter community development mid-career. We found a small number of mentoring programs and individual examples, but not lots. We have seen programs that are addressing issues of how to have people who are mid-career or mid to senior grow in the field. And through 2 national organizations, NALCAD and National Capacity, they are bringing people together from various groups to learn from each other. And Enterprise in New York City has also done a very nice, although only 1-year program. As far as entering community development at a senior level, again, it's fragmented activities. We hear stories of a board member wanting to become an executive director and the NeighborWorks folks helping that person by pairing them with an experienced executive director in another NeighborWorks organization. There's some very impressive programs designed to support senior leaders and their organizations. Our fellowship here in Boston is not community development specific, it's broader, but it has developed an amazing network that I think has helped people in a number of nonprofit leadership positions and their organizations. HACE Junior Fund out in the Bay Area provides comprehensive flexible leadership awards that address the groups that they work with across the country in their growth and leadership development. And I think many of you know about NeighborWorks Achieving Excellence, which trains leaders, supports them to address organizational challenges, and in many cases, strengthens organizations. So how do these programs do what they do? Well, there are a range of things that the organizations do. California Coalition really provides introductions to community development, technical skills, coursework, and internships, and have been very successful in getting students of color into organizations in their communities. And that program has been expanded beyond California. Keen Fellowship places people after graduate school for 2 years, gives them mentors, gives them courses, and in many cases, organizations are hiring them. ACRE gives people training through university-based real estate programs, mentors, and has developed a whole network and a brand now in Milwaukee and is being expanded elsewhere. At the mid-level, NowCab, I think, and National Capacity have been very effective in bringing leaders together from mid-level leaders together from around the country and really supporting people to both value cultural competency and what they can learn from other organizations like theirs. Enterprise in New York has similarly brought mid-level people together with mentors and preparing them for leadership positions. And finally, at the senior level, what you see from each of these programs, NeighborWorks Achieving Excellence, Bar Fellowship, and HACE, are really comprehensive programs with coaching, networking, looking at organizational challenges and building leadership, trying to keep people who may be feeling burnt out in the work, but also support new leaders. It does mean sometimes that organizations get transformed and people move to other organizations. We don't consider that necessarily bad, although I understand that's a challenge for everyone. Finally, the internal programs that we mentioned from New Jersey Community Capital and Common Bond Communities really do look inward and say, how do we develop people along our organizational continuum? How can we take folks who are here now and grow them in the work? What do they want to grow? How do they want to grow? And what do we need to do to make that happen? Moving along, if you look at a lot of these programs, what you see works, and the language you've already heard from me, are that they engage with coaches and mentors. People learn with a cohort of peers. People network over time with colleagues and alumni. Programs focus on individual growth and development, as well as implementing strategic action and organizational change. So the two together works particularly well in some of the programs. And access to sufficient resources, money and time. I can't emphasize both of those enough. It doesn't work if you don't give it enough money and time. So what needs to happen? We need, easy for me to say, recruit a diverse group of entry-level candidates into community development. We need to retain mid-level people and develop their capabilities to advance in their organizations or in community development generally. And we need to recruit a more diverse group of mid to senior level candidates into community development and support them to succeed and stay in the work. On the following pages, you'll see that we have specific suggestions both for community-based organizations and for intermediaries and funders. I'm just going to highlight a few of those that we are suggesting for you as leaders and members of nonprofit community development organizations. We think we can all do a better job introducing young people to community development careers. We've seen that organizational culture assessments really make a difference. And we need to think about what are the barriers to entry and address those. Programs like AmeriCorps and Vista have brought a number of people into the work. We think we can do more to bring in and support new people of color. And we think we can build teams that include entry, mid, and senior level staff. That will help our entry level folks. And what do we do about the mid-level folks? How can we grow them in the work? Again, organizational culture assessments and providing a welcoming environment, building individual leadership development and growth plans into our employee evaluations, funding and supporting training, reviewing our salary and benefit structures, making sure they're competitive, recognizing and encouraging generational shifts in leadership, bringing in and supporting new people of color, and finally, again, building teams that include entry, mid, and senior level staff. So that's for retention and growth of our mid-level folks. And moving along, how do we recruit a more diverse group of mid to senior level candidates and support their success? We need to, again, build and maintain a welcoming culture, ensure that new leaders are introduced to support structures, networks, and mentors. Can't emphasize that enough. Review our salary and benefit structures to ensure that they are competitive. Recognize and encourage generational shifts in leadership and leadership style, all very, very important to success of mid to senior level candidates in community development. Moving along, these are suggestions for the funding community. We can talk about those also, but mostly what we want to do is have an opportunity to dialogue with all of you and hear from people in specific organizations. We're grateful for the support of NeighborWorks and many of you who gave us input and for being able to do this important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much. Now, if we could bring in Stephen and Harry.
Yeah. So, I'll go ahead and jump in. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me, Pam and Joni. Thank you for putting together this forum to really discuss a very important topic. And so I'm very appreciative to have this opportunity to share things from a funder's perspective. But before I do that, I just want to share my introduction into community development, which came around 1996, 1997. And I actually started off my career in finance. I worked I've been in banking for my entire 30-plus-year career, but I've started my career actually in finance for a bank out in Delaware and in the investor relations group. And the individual that I reported to had gone over to run the bank's CRA program. And initially it was a one-man shop, CRA, the Community Reinvestment Act, of course. And initially it was a one-man shop, and his investment portfolio and loan portfolio has gotten larger and larger. He asked me to come and help them out. And so that was my introduction into community development. I started off underwriting community development loans and investments, then transitioned maybe about 10 years ago or so to the philanthropy side. And so, and been on the philanthropy side ever since. So from a funder's perspective, there's a couple of things I want to share and for folks to keep in mind, specifically funders that are financial institutions. So in terms of philanthropy, most of the dollars that we allocate are really targeted to have specific and tangible impact and outcomes. So to give you an example, if Wells Fargo provides $25,000 to a nonprofit organization to support homebuyer education seminars, the expectation is that obviously the nonprofit will carry out X number of homebuyer education seminars, reaching hypothetically, say 500 people, or educating, I should say, 500 people. And out of that 500 people, maybe 50 to 100 were actually able to realize the dream of home ownership and purchase a home. So that's the outcome. We have the nonprofit organization did its part to educate a number of individuals, and out of that number, we have 50 to 100 individuals purchasing a home. And so that's actually the story. That's the story that we want to share and that we want to tell in terms of playing a little role or having a little impact in those 50 or some odd individuals acquiring a home. Now, if we are funding capacity building efforts, there's still very much a story to tell, but that story may take a little longer to develop, because when we talk about the capacity building, we look at the staff training and leadership development and things of that nature. So measuring the impact of supporting capacity building efforts is a little different, and you don't have that hard number like you would say helping 50 people purchase a home. But again, there's very much a story to tell. Now, that being said, the approach Wells Fargo has always taken was listening to the community leaders and identifying the needs of the community. So we listen to the Maria Gonzalez's, we listen to the Rick Sowers and the Della Clarks of the nonprofit community. And not only is this listening taking place on a local level, but it also takes place on a national level as well. And that's why you mentioned Joan, earlier, you heard Joni mention our support of the NeighborWorks Training Institute. And that's one of the reasons why we've been a longtime supporter of the NeighborWorks Training Institute, where we provided scholarships to organizations to send, to nonprofit organizations, I should say, to send their housing counselors to receive valuable training in order to stay certified as a housing counselor. And a few years ago, when HUD changed its requirements to have housing counselors take a test to become certified, we again partnered with NeighborWorks America to bring trainings in market. So we work very closely with NeighborWorks to bring trainings here in Philadelphia and in the Delaware market, and in markets really across our entire footprint, where the nonprofit or the housing counseling community didn't have to travel outside of their home base. They could receive that valuable training. And I believe it was a 6 to 8 hour training, if you will, to get those individuals prepared to take this test that was now required by HUD. And so they can continue to remain certified as a housing counselor. And so that's one of the things. We have a national partnership, again, as Jenny mentioned, with NeighborWorks America, and that's a partnership has been working out extremely well for us. And recognizing that there's a need for support for these types of initiatives. Now, locally, a few years ago, we hosted a community summit where there were about 30 to 40 nonprofit organizations were invited. They came through. And as a result of that half-day summit, again, we listened. Wells Fargo listened to what the needs were of the community, and there was a common theme for support of capacity building programs and so forth. And so out of that summit, we created what's called the Community Leadership Investment Program, or CLIP. So we allocated a portion of our local funding to provide grants to nonprofit organizations that was looking to really enhance the skills of their respective teams. And the grant funding could have been used for the nonprofits to send their staff to different summits or different training programs and so forth that would help support the development of the staff of the nonprofit, and not just the staff, but the leadership as well. Some of the grants that we provided help in the development of that particular leader. And so after the grant, or after the CLIP grants were awarded, about 8 to 9 months later, we brought all of the recipients back to share how the grant was utilized and the impact that it had. Now, guess what? Now we have a story. Now we have that story to share about the impact of providing capacity building grants to nonprofit organizations in order to support the development of the leadership of the organization and the staff of the organization. So we really see capacity building is a very important function of a nonprofit organization to remain effective. We know full well that Philadelphia has some very strong leaders in the nonprofit space. And those organizations that are grooming the next generation of nonprofit leaders are already ahead of the game. And the last thing I'll share, and I'll put a plug in for PACDC, in terms of a resource to find new leaders in the market, reach out to Rick or Pam, because for the last 5 or so years, they host a huge gala. And as a part of that gala, they identify a number of rising stars. And these are individuals who were recognized by their respective organizations that have the potential of becoming a future leader in community development. So every year for the last, I think, 5 or so, 6 years, Pam, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, that they've had this gala where they recognize rising stars and so forth. So if you're looking for some talent, you can start right there. Ask Pam for that list. If it's not if it's okay for her to share. But I think that would be a phenomenal resource for folks who are looking for that sort of the next leader of the nonprofit organization. So with that, I will stop, and I'll be happy to take any questions as the session progresses.
And I'm just going to chime in here real quick to let you know that I'm so glad you brought that up, Stephen, because actually Harry was one of our most recent rising stars. So yeah, this proof is in the pudding, as it were.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
No, that is great. I mean, I always enjoy going to PACDC's annual event and meeting the rising stars. It's a fantastic effort. So Harry, I know HACE has done a great job throughout your history, and I think you're even a product of that, as they're saying. So please share what some of the things that HACE has done.
Perfect. So thank you for having me. Again, Joan, Pam, very grateful to be part of this panel with, such great leadership. So again, my name is Harry Tapia. I've been at HACE for 20 years. I'm 38 years old, which means that for more than half my life, I've been part of this organization, part of this culture, part of this dream job that I call it, working here. So HACE and HACE Management Company, we're based in Philadelphia. We service the Fairhill and San Hugh neighborhood, so it's about 1 square mile. We have about 20,000 residents, so we have a really highly populated service area that we service. We really recruit from the neighborhood. We make sure that we promote from the neighborhood and make sure that we give them a path to, enter into community development, but also make a career and stay here. So again, as I mentioned, I started at 19 at HACE. The way that I was recruited was through a summer internship in the accounting department. Accounting is my background. So after the summer, I knew that they had an opening and I was like, oh, great. Well, maybe I can stay. So Bill Salas, who was the predecessor to Maria Gonzalez, who's the current president, said you can only stay if, you know, you continue your education. That's the only thing. You can work here full time if you want, but the one thing you will not do is quit your education to become a part of the team. So I was like, great, you know, I promise that I will, you know, finish my bachelor's degree and make sure that back then I was thinking, yeah, make sure that I'll finish my bachelor's degree. I'll take this experience and move on. But that really wasn't in the cards. And he and Maria are really great at retaining talent. And the way that we do that, again, is from recruiting within and then really allowing employees to really expand their horizon. At HACE, what we always preach is that we're a company that has a culture of not micromanaging. We're going to allow you to really take advantage of your, you know, creativity and allow you to work hard and really expand your horizon and take whatever position you have within our company and make it yours. So they did that, and that really is sort of what laid the groundwork for us to really retain a lot of our high-level employees. One of the things is that we always preach is that path to career isn't always linear, right? And we see that with pretty much all of our employees. It isn't high school, college, and then the workforce. I want to say just about every senior level employee that we have did not follow that path. So I didn't. I got my education while I was working at HACE. Maria, who's the current president, got her education while she was working at HACE. I have 3 other department heads that are doing the same thing, right? So they're have a need of having a full-time job. We allow them to have that full-time job, but we push for education. So, hey, yeah, come join the HACE team. What are you pursuing? What is your, you know, what is your studies? We're gonna make sure that we push for that and continue to support you and be flexible enough for you to make sure that you finish your education. And then, you know, while you're doing that, you know, we are putting you in a position to either lead a department or make sure that you moved into the department that you know, that your education could really take advantage of. So we, you know, we do that a lot. We also use a lot of local, you know, resources. So CareerLink, there was a lot of our property managers that we recruited from welfare to work programs, which was really important. So there's a lot of local talent where we are. We just have to figure out, you know, how to tap into it. And so we use whatever vehicles are available. And then once we bring them in, I always say that there is the seat that's going to lead you to your career, which to HACE is, our main office is at 167 West Allegheny. And the administrative front desk, that I just about every property manager, every department head sat in that office and in that chair, because you're dealing with the public, you're picking up phones, you're assistant property managing, and it really gives you the experience that we're going to tap, even though they don't know it, right? We get a lot of young people that come through the door like, hey, I need a job. I'm like, sure, we need an administrative assistant to sit in the front desk and take calls. And then based on their skill levels, then we start, you know, breaking them off into property management or into housing counseling. So we take, you know, the strength of dealing with the public, and then, you know, we start cultivating that and then put them in property management positions. So now they went from answering a desk to managing 1 maintenance staff and managing 50 residents. And then we know, oh, great, then maybe we can move them over to HACE. And now we move them over to HACE, they're under a department and, you know, they're working. And then we say, oh, well, maybe they can actually lead the department. And that's how we've really been able to retain a lot of our staff. A lot of our staff have been with us over 10 years. So it's not just Maria and myself. Maria's been here 27 years. Again, I've been here 20. Person who heads our accounting department has been here 11 years with us. We recruited her from Aramark Corporation. We saw her and like, hey, you know, you think you would like to work at HACE? And, you know, she came in and she's been with us ever since. our housing counselor department. Amanda came in at the age of 19. Now she's in her 30s. Now she's leading that department, a department of 10. Our NAC, she was a former teacher, so the Neighborhood Advisory Committee, who does a lot of community engagement. We met her through community engagement. She was a teacher and wanted to do something else, and we recruited her. And she's been with us 5 years. Amanda, who I just mentioned, was just a rising star last year. So again, the proof is in the pudding. So we really, cultivate folks from the neighborhood, and we make sure that we keep them. One big thing is the culture, right? So we have a great leader who's very hands-on, no matter through what happens, whether it's this pandemic, whether it's the store looting or, whatever problem that we face, she's always the first one that is ready to shut our offices down and make sure that if we need to go handle a cleanup, if we need to strategize to really help the community, she's the first one that's there with us. And that really, to me and to the staff that's under me, it's really something that we take to heart because, she's leading by example. And we know, like, if we have a problem, that she's going to be there with us frontline and making sure that, she's part of it. She's not just leading from her desk. She's, walking with us and, again, giving us opportunities to really diverse ourselves.
Wow, I've heard Maria speak to this, and I'm always amazed. It's just incredible, and but you use the word recruitment a lot, and recruiting from the neighborhood, and you said you saw somebody and said, hey, come work for us, and Stephen, you talked about the resource of PACDC, and that's an outlet to get that recruitment, but it's easier said than done, I think. Like, I mean, what is, well, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, Harry, but how has HACE, how have you actually recruited? I mean, what does that look like in your organization?
Perfect. So again, we really use CareerLink. I want to say 6 out of our 8 property managers, that's how we were able to land them and really, bring them in. Also, we have an internship program. So we have the Community Connector program. I'm sorry, we were just able to place 2 community connectors who actually came in as volunteers. Now, one is in our Main Street department as the Main Street assistant manager, and then one is in the housing counseling department. We really look at young people and we really have them talk to their friends. Like, hey, we have a job opportunity. We are always promoted within first. So we say, hey, listen, I'm looking for, whether it's a maintenance guy or I'm looking for a new community connector, or I'm looking for somebody to be an administrative assistant. We always talk to the new recruits like, hey, do you know anybody, whether it's, at your school, because some of them are in college, at your church congregation, in your neighborhood that is ready to work hard and can make a career. And we've gotten a lot of references that way, really from within. And then of course, promoting every single one of our department heads has, come through within. We rarely ever have to go out and recruit department heads or senior level. Folks know when they walk in, like, hey, you can be like me and Maria. We started here, as an entry-level employee, and now we're part of the executive team.
That's amazing. Stephen, I'll put you on the spot a little bit. Oftentimes we hear from our organizations that, when you talked about capacity building and that, and we support that and love that. But then, unlike I say, sometimes people get those skills and move on. And, and oftentimes they go work in the financial industry. So I guess the question is, how can we recruit people from the financial industry to come work for an HACE or from some of our NeighborWorks organizations or other CDCs?
That's a great question, Joni, and a question that I do not have an answer for, quite frankly. I would say, obviously within the financial institutions, there's an abundance of different opportunities. Some for myself, I've ever since my introduction into the sort of the community development space, I loved it. I love being on the side of looking at opportunities to support and providing whatever resources, whether it's financial or human capital, to organizations that's looking at to make an impact in their communities. In terms of sort of the nonprofit world, recruiting from the financial sector, that's a good question. Obviously, I can't think of anyone who has gone from. No, I do. I do know a couple of folks who have gone from the financial sector to the nonprofit world, and the reasoning is obviously the for-profit world. There's a lot of red tape. There's a lot of, obviously we're regulated by the federal government and so forth. And there's for things to get done, it takes a little while longer to make things happen. So the reasoning for some of those individuals who move from the financial sector to the nonprofit sector is, they could make more of an impact a little quicker than they would be on the financial sector, the private sector side. So, but that's a great question, and would love to hear if others might have a thought or idea with regards to, sort of the reverse of going from the nonprofit to the private sector and from the private sector to the nonprofit sector.
I actually, and this is Paralee with Wells Fargo, I have the great pleasure of working with the wonderful Stephen Briggs at Wells Fargo, covering the Pennsylvania, Delaware, and New Jersey market. And so the only thing I would add on to that, Stephen, is just, I think, engagement. I think a lot of times, to your point, sometimes there can be other reasons that people are connecting with these organizations. But I think once you find an organization that has a passion point for what you really, really want to do, because you may have a great career over in the financial sector, but you may say, this organization is doing really great work and there's a sweet spot for what I really want to do. And so I think just for organizations to continue to be engaged with other institutions that they may, see, opportunities with, I think would be the best way, because that way they'll already have hands-on opportunities from working with you. And then maybe, that provides the leeway into other conversations for other opportunities. So that's the only thing I would add.
Great point.
I would just say in my recruiting, I find people when we, before COVID, we would go to meetings, but, by Zoom, you find people in the financial institutions, in philanthropy, who are passionate, who do want to do the work. You get them on a board, you get them on a committee, and I can point to several examples of folks who have made the transition. It may not seem that natural, but I think particularly if you can find higher level positions for some of those folks, they're terrific.
That's absolutely right. Correct, Anna. I completely agree.
Yeah, and for us, so we're not linear, right? So a lot of our positions, like our housing counseling positions, we do not require housing counseling experience. We've really recruited a lot of tellers from banks because they make a great segue into housing counseling. And what we do is like, hey, this is a position, look at it, look at the requirements. If you think you can do this, we will train you. So you have to be willing to invest. Rarely ever bring another housing counseling from another agency into that role. We really like, hey, let's give somebody else an opportunity, somebody that's maybe in a different industry, whether it's banking or whether they're working in insurance, but they really have similar skills. And we're like, hey, we'll bring you in here, we'll invest in you, and this could be a career path for you. And that's really what we lead with in our interview. Like, hey, we'll train you, we'll invest a lot of money into your training. We're willing to get you certified. The only thing that we ask is that you don't leave us right away, right? Because it might lead to another position, whether it's within our CDC or our property management. And we've been lucky, I want to say, that we've kept all our housing counselors that we've certified. But we look at it different industries and really don't try to make them fit, right? So it's like, I'm not looking for a housing counselor. I'm looking for somebody that I can make into a housing counselor and take the skills, whether they're working in the financial or in insurance, and really, transcend them into, the all-star that they'll be, right, in the future once we give them the training, within.
But that you just hit it on the head. I mean, the willingness to invest, and but so many organizations, I'm sure you know this, when they have an opening, or they wanted somebody that can come in, hit the ground running, and can start working the next day. And so what do you say to those organizations? I mean, what can we say that, because obviously it's working at ASE. So how can we convince these organizations to take that time and take that risk and make that investment?
Yeah, I talk to some of our housing counselors, even though, don't recruit them. They won't leave us. Be able to talk to them. I mean, again, they all come from different backgrounds. I believe we have one that was a prior housing counselor, but she's been with us like 10 to 12 years. And back before there were certifications. But yeah, the proof is in the pudding, and they stay with us because, also the culture that we offer, like, hey, we're going to give you all this training. Work is going to be tough, but it's going to be fun while you're doing it. We're a team environment, and we've been very lucky, very, very lucky, plucking sort of the stars that are in other that really enjoy this.
Harry, I think that makes a ton of sense. That idea of taking people with transferable skills, not having done exactly what you're training them to do. But my question for you would be, so how do you bake into the way you organize your work that you have people who have time to do the training, to train up those folks? How does that work? And how do people balance? Do you have people who are just trainers, or do you have people who are also trying to do their own workload and then they're also training? And because I know that a lot of times, organizations are worried about that. If someone spends time training new staff, they won't get their own work done. So how do you address that?
Yeah, so we work as a team, and we understand there is going to be a learning curve. So we are really understanding, right? When we look at pretty much all of our senior level positions, whether it's accounting, whether it's marketing, whether it's housing counseling, it's really unique, right? Like, my background is accounting. I got a degree in accounting. I think I had 3 chapters in nonprofit accounting. I learned on the job. So we know that we have a, specific industry that has a specific skills. And, just like my mentor before me, who was the controller, and it took him really 3 years to train me. As I got bookkeepers under me, I knew it was going to take me 3 years. And you start that balance of, hey, I'm going to give you more to do as I train you, but we're going to work together as a team. So you're constantly, balancing that training and, getting the work done. But when you work as a team, then, and you're not a one-man team, right? Because that also is something that, could be an obstacle. But then you really have to rely on the other senior leadership within the organization. But we know, like, you're going to make mistakes. That's okay. We know that, you don't have experience in whether it's accounting or, housing counseling. It's okay. We'll learn from our mistakes, until you get polished. And then that you're going to have to train the person behind you, right? There's going to be somebody new that's going to come behind you, and you're going to have to give them the sort of, the same learning curve and the same ropes.
I'm gonna chime in, jump in and ask a question, because y'all referenced it, Anne, in your presentation, and Harry and Stephen, I think you referenced it too. Can any of you specifically talk about this issue of cultural fit, right? Because we know that is an obstacle. It's a very big obstacle for many organizations, whether they're small organizations that serve that, the leadership is multicultural, or there are larger organizations where the organization is majority led, but serving a minority community. We hear that pretty that culture fit, or the mismatch of culture, or the mishmash of it, where people feel uncomfortable or afraid to speak or whatever because of the the nuances that can happen as new people come into a situation. Can you talk about how organizations what they need to be thinking about as they try to make transitions towards diversification much more open and much more comfortable for the newer people coming in, so that they can feel comfortable enough to stay? And I'll leave that open to anybody.
Yeah, I mean, what I heard from folks at Common Bond, and what I would say just from personal experience, there's a lot that we all have to learn, and we'll make mistakes. They did organizational culture assessments, but that wasn't enough. They clearly brought in an HR person who had a lot of experience in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really changing the organizational culture and being able to look at all levels of the organization in terms of sensitivity to what people need, changes in language, which, people like me still make mistakes, and we have to acknowledge that. I think that mentorships, finding models of people who have been successful, who look like you, can help. There's a series of things that I think people continue to try and don't stop. It's a process over time, is clearly what I've heard from a lot of people and seen.
The good news, what we're seeing at NeighborWorks, the really good news is that as transitions are occurring, especially at the executive level or the deputy level, we are finding more people of color being hired. And in many cases, I forget the numbers in the Northeast region, but the majority of people that are coming in of color are replacing people that are majority, are white, are not of color. And that's the good news. The good news is that we're seeing it happen. What makes us nervous is, does the organization really understand and appreciate its own culture? And can it welcome people that don't look like the board of directors or whoever, or some, it is a cultural shift. So, one of the things we've been doing at NeighborWorks is providing grants to organizations that are interested in doing, like Ann said, cultural assessments, and really getting deep into race, equity, diversity, inclusion, really willing to really look at where there are microaggressions and being willing to confront those and have honest and open communication. It's very important. It's one thing to say, yeah, we got to recruit people, we got to bring in people in the community and all that, but if it's not a welcoming environment, or if it's a different culture, it's hard.
And it's that question at all levels, right? It's not just, okay, we bring in, AmeriCorps members from the community who are people of color, but we're not moving people up through the organization. So that's not going to work.
And Pam, I'll just add, obviously Wells Fargo there's always been a concerted effort on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've had diversity councils and so forth, which was comprised of folks of all different backgrounds, and it was a safe space for folks to come and share their thoughts and be very candid about their experience and so forth. And it was a learning opportunity for many of our employees. But just recently, from a philanthropic standpoint, we actually had a racial equity listening session that just ironically just took place last week. And we've invited 5 BIPOC-led nonprofit leaders in to address our public affairs councils. And our public affairs councils are leaders, local leaders, representing different lines of businesses, from banking to government relations to business banking and so forth, IT. And so this Public Affairs Council is sort of the body that comes together that talks about sort of reputation risk, but we also talk about how we want our philanthropic dollars to be allocated and so forth. And so we had those 5 diverse or BIPOC leaders in to share their experiences, the barriers of being a minority leading a major nonprofit organization and so forth. And we vehemently took notes. It was well appreciated from the council members because, you know, myself and Paralee, we are the ones on the ground sort of day-to-day meeting with these nonprofit leaders and sort of bringing those opportunities back to the council, whereas there's very little interaction between the council and the nonprofit community. So it was a great opportunity for our council members to hear directly from these leaders about some of the barriers and some of the challenges and some of the triumphs, quite frankly, of their efforts and so forth. So that's been something that will started this year and will be an ongoing thing from that philanthropic space.
That's excellent. That's excellent to hear. Joan, do you think you might be ready to start taking questions from the audience?
Yeah, and I see that there is a question in the chat from Amanda. I don't know, Amanda, if you want to come off mute and share the question, or I can read it.
So our organization, our CD employees are pretty overloaded at this point and pretty burnt out. I mean, our staff, we've already hired like 3 new people at this point. You know, the senior staff are training the greener staff, but with all of the different stimulus funds that are coming in, you know, that's obviously new work on top of their normal everyday duties. I just didn't know if you had any insight or suggestions on kind of how to retain those employees, keep those employees happy during a time like we're dealing with right now.
Hey, this is Harry from HACE, and we are facing this exact problem. For us, it's a difficult problem because we've already, are a group who works really hard, right? So we've already sort of had our employees really getting the most max output from them, right? And because it's our culture, right? Like I say, we work hard and we expect a lot from our employees. However, I think that at that same regard, right, we're very understanding. And really how we've kept our employees it is being understanding, right? And knowing that, hey, you might have to give a counselor 3 days off because that we really have leaned on her. During the COVID, some of the things that we've done, for Thanksgiving, we shut down a whole week. For Christmas, we shut down a whole week because we know we needed to allow our employees to really get away. It was a shutdown. Nobody can go on vacation. And at HACE, we kept our offices open. We've been open since May of 2020. And again, that starts from the leadership, though. So when we see that, our executive director is working just as hard as we are, staying later than we are, but yet being supportive and being understanding when an employee says, hey, I need some days off. I think I'm to the point where I'm getting ready to be burnt out. So really, having that understanding with the department heads and then the department head with the employees and giving them some time to shut out, right? Like, hey, take this week and come back and we'll be ready to go at it again. But it's tough and we're still trying to find our way through navigating that. But being flexible and understanding goes a long way, especially to working mothers that, have kids that are at home. So they're teachers and they have to be at work and, being flexible with their schedule, right? Sometimes you have to offer them flexible working hours. So really being understanding and sensitive to the current situation, because at HACE, most of us are all parents. We're all dealing with the pandemic at the same time that our employees are dealing with it while having a higher workload.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Our organizations, a lot of them NeighborWorks organizations, they've just found that just communicating a lot more. I mean, because even as difficult it is to not be together, but try to really just communicate and find time to have some fun together. I mean, not just communicate about work, but just, do something fun or send a little gift every now and then, or an Uber Eats or DoorDash coupon so they can get a meal for their families. I mean, there's little things like that, but communication is key. I mean, I think that's where we've heard a lot of organizations really saying it's important to just talk to one another and check in on one another and making sure everybody's okay, so they can feel comfortable sharing that, like, hey, I'm about to blow my brains out, help. But encouraging that atmosphere for people to share that and talk to one another.
Yeah, and compensation.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
no, go right ahead.
Oh, yeah, and compensation. That was a big thing for us. So we said, hey, we challenged all of our housing counselors. Listen, I know the pandemic hit. You need to get your certification. You get your certification, we're going to spot bonus you $1,000. And they're like, oh, really? Yes, we believe in you. We're going to invest in you. So also through compensation, we know that we're asking a lot more of them. So we have to reflect that in their salaries. Our organization is doing better, so therefore we want to make sure that our employees are doing better.
I'm glad you mentioned bonus.
Yeah, one of the things I just want to make sure I echo is tremendous. The fact that, there are more pressures on these organizations now than ever before, and they will continue. The pressure's not going to go away. So that means that as you invest in the infrastructure of your organization through technology and the bricks and mortar, you need to invest in the people, because none of that works without people. And so that means you've got to come up with some real money to support your people, if in return in terms of PTO time, paid time off, or bonuses or cash incentives, or more flexible work schedule. That is real resources, right? But people see that, and they see that you're willing as an institution to invest in them as a human being. People will work with you and stay with you. I cannot stress that enough. If you don't take anything away from this conversation today, other than the fact that you need to view the people who are working with you as the most critical asset of your work, period. That's it. So if you work under that lens, you can figure some things out as you go along.
Absolutely. I mean, Harry said it up front. I mean, it's investment. It's investment. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't, they recognize it, but they can't get their arms around it to really make it work.
Well, it's investment. It's also acknowledging that the people you have they're very valuable to you as working resources, and they're also very valuable people who can help you bring in other people. So, the Common Bond folks were offering bonuses to people who brought in people who actually got hired for property management or whatever. I mean, we all have networks, right? And Harry, it sounds like you all, really use people's networks. When I do searches, I always ask board and staff to provide suggestions. I mean, you've got to reach all over and reward people for what they're doing.
I know I had one question for the panel. Maybe it's more towards Stephen, but I'd love to hear the insight from Ann and Paula and even Joni. So one of the things that we've seen time and time again, particularly with our organizations that are led by individuals of color, is, they go to meetings similar to this all the time, where people are talking about, well, we want to diversify, we want, they see the language on the funders, website. And yet when you look at the dollar for dollar ratio in terms of what those funders are investing in terms of an organization that may be led by a majority individual versus organizations that are led by women and people of color, or sex, gender minorities, it's like a world of difference. So if the panel could talk a little bit about what would you encourage other funders and key decision makers to be thinking about as they kind of tout the word diversity, or the concept of racial equity and diversity and inclusion, and recruitment and retention. what would you challenge them or encourage them to really step into as they think about this work and their own work moving forward to really see diverse and equitable communities and organizations thrive?
Yeah, Pat, I would say, one is really going back to communication and having, the conversations with the nonprofit community that you are providing or that you're looking to provide resources to, and really get a good feel for the makeup of nonprofit, the population that they serve, and the impact the nonprofit is making in the communities for which they work in. And I'll go back to the comment I made about the BIPOC listening session. That was sort of one of the intentions of this listening session, was again to have other leaders within Wells Fargo listen and hear, not from myself, and we're not from Paralee, but directly from the nonprofit organizations about some of the challenges and so forth that they've, experienced, and to give them a better understanding of what's happening and why we should consider supporting an initiative either at an increased level or in some other way, to ensure that those issues or play whatever role we can play in addressing those issues. So, and again, that's been that will continue to be a very concerted effort to listen more and to realize and try and be equitable as well in terms of our philanthropic dollars and how those dollars are being distributed. That's something we also look at in terms of where the dollars are going, who it's supporting, who's leading those organizations, and the populations that the organization is serving. So that's all of the above are things that we look at internally in terms of making decisions on how we want to allocate our funding.
I think one of the areas that I know NeighborWorks has been stepping up in, and we've talked about, is modeling. So if you're going to say to the organizations you fund, you need to have more people of color, you need to have more leaders of color, then you as a funder need to model that. And having leading, it's good to see the intermediaries have, and at least locally, I can say more of the funding institutions are being run by people of color. It's good to see more opportunities for people to grow within those intermediaries and funding institutions. And I think, Joni can speak to that more than I can, but from what I understand from her and others, is deliberate and provides the model to say, yeah, we're not just talking, we're doing.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I am proud to say that NeighborWorks America's C-suite, entire C-suite, are all people of color, which we're very proud of, and other staff as well. Our the composition of the staff is very diverse, but which is not to say that we're perfect, believe me. And in fact, we're about to commission with a consultant to analyze all of our grant making. Because we do want to make sure it's more equitable across the country. And so we are having somebody come in and a company come in to do an analysis to make sure that how we distribute our funds, that it's equitable. So yeah, but thank you. And I mean, I think we are modeling it. I'm glad we are, and that is important.
Thank you,
So
guys.
I have a quick question for Ann or Paula in terms of the study that you guys presented. And I don't know if it was sort of market specific or what have you, but in that study, if it were there certain sort of markets, if you will, that were ahead of others in terms of that recruiting and retention for not non-prep. I don't know if there's been any sort of breakdown or any details with regards to, hey, you know what, that they're doing things right, up in Boston, and maybe not the entire, market, but there were a handful of organizations, a la ASE, that, that's really getting it right. Were there any sort of examples of other areas that stuck out to you guys in terms of that whole recruiting and retention piece?
Well, Paula, you really focused on the California group. Maybe you want to talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, we weren't so much comparing different regions as, what we were trying to do is figure out what are the factors that lead to success. But, as Ann mentioned, California Coalition for Rural Housing, they have I think they are a model that should be replicated all over the country, because they reach out to young people in college between their junior and senior year, and they have a very intensive summer training in very technical skills, which they've learned over the years is really important. And then they place them with paid internships in a community-based organization where they're from. And one of the things that was so interesting that I learned about that, and this has really gotten me thinking about, mindset, is that the organizations found they had to change in response to having these young interns, right, who were learning the technical skills and were coming in, but they were doing things differently, and the organizations had to change. And that's one of the things that kind of strikes me. And Harry, it kind of also harkens back to what you were saying is, you're not hiring someone to do the job they just did. You're hiring them for another, transferable skills. And I think mindset is so important, because if you keep thinking we're just going to hire new people to replace the people who are already doing it, then the organization doesn't have an opportunity to grow and change. And if you expect people to come with the same background, and then if you expect them to lead in the same way, and I think that's one of the things that's really hard for organizations, is to realize, to walk the talk, you have to be willing to change. Right? Your whole organization needs to be able to change. People are going to do things very differently in the future than they did in the past, and that's okay. It's got to be okay.
Awesome.
Yeah, and Stephen, and to answer your question, I was thinking of our network, across the country, and I hate to say it, I say there are some that have, in different regions, so it's not like regional necessarily. I could think of a few in the Northeast, a few in the Southern region, a few in the Midwest, but really I say is just they really up there.
Thank you.
Philosophy of the organization. It goes back to, again, we keep talking about the culture. It's the culture of the organization, and that's rare. That's rare. To see that. And going along with that, Harry, and I know we were almost out of time, I'm just curious, is the board of directors also involved in this? Do they understand the culture and support it and all of that? Because that's so important as well.
Yeah, and sort of the same approach to recruiting board members, right? So our board of directors is, much, mirrors sort of our employees. We're about 90% minority at our board. And, we really recruit not just like, hey, have you done, insurance for community development organization? Have you done banking? And you're the ones that we want. It's really like, hey, how can we tap in to minorities that are, professionals that can really help us develop as an organization, and really tapped into them and, recruit them. And then also retention, right? Like, hey, you can stay here 3 years, but if there's a way that we can, keep you on the board or keep you active within the HACE family, and really, try to keep that culture and cultivating them and, making them feel like they're part of the change, right? That's really how we recruit them and retain them. Like when we open a brand new senior facility, it's like, hey, we're going to have a party. Come look at, what your volunteer hours go into. look at this beautiful building, look at the people that we're serving, look at their faces. So, it is a culture. It starts from the board down to the, ED, and then it really just flows through the rest of the organization.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Wow, this is awesome sauce. You guys did an amazing job. Thank you everyone for joining us and sharing your great work and deep thought about this. I've worked for PACDC now since 2007, and every single day I am astonished at the level of commitment and personal dedication and just impact of our members and the concentric circle of our friends, Wells Fargo and NeighborWorks, Stephen and Joan in particular, the individuals within those organizations that you really do roll up their sleeves and work collectively for transformative impact and astonishing. So I'm on behalf of all of us here at PACDC, we're very grateful for you for today and all of the work that you do every day in our community. And Anne and Paula, it was lovely meeting you and learning about your great work and your great insight. And I know there'll be a number of people on our team and across our network who will be digging into the work that you've assembled. And we look forward to learning more about how NeighborWorks will unfold this work and unpack this work moving forward. Joni, was there anything else you wanted to share with our group before we let everyone go for the day?
No, I just want to thank everybody who joined us, and certainly thank Stephen and Harry. And Harry jumped in at the last minute. Maria was going to join us, suddenly had a conflict. So Harry, thank you. It was wonderful. And of course, Pam and PACDC. We appreciate the partnership. And of course, Anne and Paula. And there will be a report. I mean, we have the PowerPoint, which I think you'll share, but also there will be a report coming out soon, and we'll make sure we get that to you as well.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you all of our attendees for today. We really are grateful for y'all committing your time. We know you're very, very busy individuals doing very important work, but this conversation was important to have. And, please, we encourage you to keep a lookout on our website, www.pacdc.org, under events for future conversations. We've been partnering now with NeighborWorks now for close to 5 or 6 years, doing a number of really great things, but specifically during the 2021 and 2022 year, we're collaborating with them, following their great lead around making a deep dive around race, equity, diversity, and inclusion. There'll be more conversations that'll be led by some experts with NeighborWorks. We encourage you to sign up for those so that you can join with us in our learning pathway. Again, thank you all for joining us. Thank you everyone on the panel for so much that you do for us. And we're gonna let everyone go 2 minutes early. You get 2 minutes. But make sure you use those 2 minutes wisely.